Now available in paperback and Kindle, vampires stalk the darkness of the Eternal Night. Get your copy of Eternal Night in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. Marvel Studios' Blade reboot has officially been canceled once again. Now, this Blade reboot starring Mahershala Ali was announced with great fanfare in 2019, with Kevin Feige stating that Oscar winner Mahershala Ali would be playing the role of Blade that was made legendary by actor Wesley Snipes. And this Blade reboot was going to be special because it was going to be a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which was at its peak at the time, and it was going to take us into the supernatural world of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Unfortunately, what has happened over the last 6 years is that the Blade reboot basically has wound up in development hell, as multiple screenwriters and directors have been hired and basically quit the project, and that has made it where this Blade reboot never got to see a single frame of film ever be shot. And as Marvel Studios has struggled to be able to develop a solo Blade film, they've basically wound up in a situation with this film where it's become one of the biggest disasters for Marvel Studios outside of the series of flops that have taken place over the last 5 years. Now, what's really sad about the Blade reboot is that Marvel Studios, even with all of its talent that worked for it as screenwriters, directors, and with an Academy Award-winning actor, couldn't put together a Blade film that could be on the level of Wesley Snipes' iconic film from 1998, which went on to revive the entire superhero movie genre. Now, the 1998 film Blade basically brought the entire superhero movie genre back after Batman and Robin the previous year basically tanked the entire genre. And Wesley Snipes is the one who basically opened the door for other superhero movies to be made, like Fox's X-Men, which came out in 2000, 2002's iconic Spider-Man series, and other films like The Hulk and Daredevil, which came out in 2003 and eventually led to the door opening for Iron Man in 2008 and the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And what's really sad is that Marvel Studios, again with all of its talent, couldn't go out here and make a Blade film, something that Wesley Snipes was able to easily do when he adapted the character. Now, Wesley Snipes, back in 1997, basically wanted to play Black Panther, but basically was told he couldn't play that role, so he went out here and took the character of Blade, reinvented this character, basically creating his own version of the character from the ground up, and after creating his own version, basically turned that character into one of the icons of superhero films. And that icon of superhero films was still remaining to be popular, even in films like Deadpool and Wolverine, where the character got a huge pop in many theaters when he appeared once again as an older version of Blade, and showed that the Blade character still had some life in it. Unfortunately, the problem is that Marvel Studios, as I see it, winds up overthinking this whole situation as related to making a Blade reboot movie. Now, the big problem over at Marvel Studios is that, as I see it, is that they are overthinking things as related to a vampire movie, because a Blade movie, as I see it, is something that's very simple to make. I mean, you have a hero who basically hunts vampires and does it in a cool way. I mean, Wesley Snipes was able to do this. He gave us a film that featured a cool hero with a black female love interest taking on a whole host of vampires, and it was done at a modest budget. But Marvel Studios just can't seem to put together a story that can get people excited about this character. And it's really sad because basically, in the time that Marvel Studios has had this film in development hell, Ryan Coogler has come out with the film Sinners and has created a blockbuster hit as related to the entire vampire genre, showing us that there is a black audience ready to go out here and see a vampire movie, as I've stated before, because there are a group of black people out here eager to see sci-fi and fantasy films, but sadly Marvel Studios keeps getting in its own way, and as they continue to get in their own way, they basically keep themselves from being able to make this movie because many of the people there want to go out here and try to shoehorn identity politics and social justice into the narrative of Blade, which is just a simple vampire story. I mean, vampire stories aren't that hard. I myself have written vampire stories like Isis Night of the Vampires, Isis Bride of Dracula, Isis Escape from Transylvania, and even did a whole novel of a vampire story called Eternal Night. I mean, it's not that hard to do a vampire story. If Ryan Coogler can do it, and a guy like me can go out here and do this on self-publishing, why can't Marvel Studios do it with all the resources they have? That's the critical question I have to ask of many of those Marvel Studios executives. Why is it that you couldn't get a Blade movie together when others have basically done this and followed this formula and gotten success very easily? I mean, it's very easy to make a vampire story. I mean, again, I did it with the Isis series, and I also did it with Eternal Night, which is a more complex vampire story, and I definitely urge you to go out here and pick up a copy of Eternal Night to see how easy it is to do a vampire story with black characters. But Marvel Studios is sitting there saying, we're having a hard time doing one of the easiest films that are able to do in the horror genre. Now, what Marvel Studios is proposing to do this time, instead of a Blade movie, is go out here and make a Midnight Suns movie that would feature Blade and other characters like Jack Drake and Morbius the Vampire, and that's where I gotta say Marvel Studios is still on the wrong track, because all they have to do is look at the movie Blade Trinity, which is considered to be the weakest movie out of all the Blade movies, because basically what they did in that movie was look to marginalize Wesley Snipes and put him in the background of a franchise he created to see the complete and unmitigated disaster a Midnight Suns movie would be. But when it comes down to the white supremacists in Hollywood, they really don't want to see the black man up front in his own film, and they don't want to acknowledge the success of black movies in the fantasy genre, because what they want you to do is continue to imagine a world where white people are the lead heroes and the main characters. That's the thing that basically upsets most of these folks about Blade, and one of the reasons why they keep tripping over their feet as related to a Blade reboot is because they don't want you to see a black man in the lead role of a fantasy film, and they don't want to acknowledge the ongoing success of black fantasy films and the black fantasy genre. I mean, basically, again, Blade was the movie that basically revived the superhero movie genre. That's one thing that makes many of these white guys in Hollywood mad. Two, Black Panther went out here, was the #1 movie of 2018, basically cementing that there is an audience for black fantasy and science fiction films. And the whole thing with Blade would be, it would basically show that it would be a major audience for these type of films, and Hollywood has been again undermining that whole genre because they want to not make films that feature black leads, and even worse, what they don't want to do is go out here and give wealth to black producers and black actors and blacks, and especially black screenwriters like myself. They don't want to see wealth come into the hands of black people as related to the entertainment industry behind the camera. They don't want to give black people power behind the camera the way Bill Cosby had it and the way the late Melvin Van Peebles had it with Sweet Sweetback Song. No, what they want to do is make sure that if as related to the behind the camera, the people in charge behind the camera are white people like they were during the blaxploitation era, and they would be the ones who would control the narrative as related to the image of black people. That's what they want to do, and that's why they would rather do a Midnight Suns movie rather than give us a straight Blade movie. Because a straight Blade movie basically would say that, hey, we have a black fantasy genre. We have black people imagining themselves in a world where they don't see white people as powerful. Because if you watch the original Blade, Wesley Snipes basically was a guy who didn't care about white people. They weren't the center focus of his story. He was with a black woman. The whole movie was black empowerment all the way through from beginning to end. And Wesley Snipes again made this film, and it became a cultural icon to the point where, again, it basically influenced other films like The Matrix and influenced the entire superhero movie genre, showing the power and influence of foundational black Americans on American culture. That's something many in Hollywood don't want to acknowledge because if you look historically, again, black people have basically saved Hollywood. I mean, it was Melvin Van Peebles who was one of the architects who saved Hollywood with Sweet Sweetback Song, and Wesley Snipes saved the superhero movie genre with Blade. And they don't want, again, black fantasy to grow and be the genre that basically saves Hollywood once more. And that's why they are, again, drag their feet and look to make a Midnight Suns movie. But a Midnight Suns movie would fail just like Blade Trinity failed to catch on. I mean, what turned people off about Blade Trinity was Blade being in the background of his own movie, and the same thing would happen in a Midnight Suns movie where you would have, again, Frank Drake or Morbius or Ghost Rider, all these white guys at the front, and Blade in the back of his own movie. And the movie's focus wouldn't be on vampires, it would be on the supernatural, and it would be on the supernatural not giving us a black perspective, which is what made Blade a special film. No, it would be a film where Blade would be once again marginalized the way he was in Blade Trinity, and that's not what people want to see. No, people want to see a Blade movie. They want to see Blade be front and center in his own movie. They want to see Blade go out here handling business. They want to see Blade killing vampires. And that type of film, again, very simple to make. A vampire movie about a daywalker vampire killing vampires. Easy movie to make. And if you wanted to get more complex, you could make a film like Sinners or a film like Eternal Night, which deals with a much more complex themes of religion and the whole culture of vampires. That's what I did in Eternal Night, dealing with the culture of vampires in black culture and also dealing with the overall culture of vampires in the SJS Direct universe. I mean, it's not that hard to make a vampire movie, but Marvel Studios basically fumbled the ball, and the plan to make a Blade movie, Blade, without him going solo, basically is a fumble. I mean, they just keep fumbling the ball, kicking the ball down the road as related to this film that they greenlit in 2019, and it's just embarrassing to watch this Blade reboot turn into a Midnight Suns thing, because the Midnight Suns is all about putting a black character in the background of another man's movie. And again, we've seen this fail once before, and we may see it fail once again. And the sad part of this whole situation, as related to this Blade reboot being canceled and being turned into a Midnight Suns movie, is that Hollywood is repeating the same mistake they made with Blade Trinity, repeating the same mistake once again, and showing us the definition of insanity seems to be a way of life in Hollywood. And it's a way of life in Hollywood because the whites supremacists keep looking to do the exact same thing, but not understanding you're not going to get a different result. Now, if you want to check out my vampire stories on the SJS Direct imprint, you can pick up Isis Night of the Vampires, Isis Bride of Dracula, and Isis Escape from Transylvania on Amazon.com, along with my vampire novel Eternal Night. All 4 of those books are available, again, not only on Amazon.com, but are also available at other online booksellers like Draft Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And I also write other stories in the supernatural, like Esteemed Horror in the Hamptons and the entire John Haynes series. And you can, again, find those books along with the Isis series, Vampire books, and Eternal Night on Amazon.com and other online booksellers. And if you want to see me take Hollywood to the barbecue, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Bride of Dracula, Goddess Next Door, and John Haynes team up to take on the dark vampire in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Bride of Dracula in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, Isis, Escape from Transylvania. The Goddess Next Door and John Haynes must escape a horde of vampires on the hunt in this horror-filled Isis series adventure. Get Isis, Escape from Transylvania in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Take a trip into the macabre world of goth modeling in the new millennium in this spooktacular Spinsterella story. Pick up your copy of Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.